Black Star was founded in Philadelphia
in a lineage of global anti-colonial struggle
on land which has been stewarded by the Lenni Lenape people for centuries.
We call in our Black, Indigenous, and Brown ancestors
who bent time and envisioned a freer, more tender world for us, one that we continue to reach for.
We honor all Indigenous peoples and their lands and acknowledge the ongoing genocide and displacement of Indigenous and Black communities.
Merely naming the people of this land is not an act of repair, nor is it a form of decolonization.
After all, decolonization is an unsettling thing.
We use this reminder as an opening
to consider ongoing self-determination movements of colonized people across the world,
from Palestine to Puerto Rico and everywhere in between.
The violence inflicted on our communities is immeasurable and irreparable.
Still, we gather in the spirit of generous and joyful exchange and other cultural expression.
As Tony Cade Bambara has shown us, through cultural work, we create space for imagination,
critique,
gathering,
pleasure,
love,
and radical care.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for participating in the 11th Annual Black Star Film Festival. We'd like to thank our funders and individual donors, as well as you, our virtual audience, for coming out and supporting us all of these days. I can't believe that it's already the last day of the festival. Please follow us on all social media platforms at Black Star Fest and use the hashtags BSFF22 and at BlackStar11. The runtime for this panel, Disability Justice and Filmmaking, is 60 minutes, including audience Q&A. So definitely leave your questions in the chat and we'll do our best to engage them if we have the time. My name is Farah. I am the panel producer and I'm extremely excited about this beautiful chorus of folks gathered here today. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our panel for this afternoon. Andrés J. Molina was born and raised in Dominican Republic before moving to New York City, where he is currently a director, an advocate, and a brilliant filmmaker who's going to share so much wisdom with us today. Reveca Torres is an artist, illustrator, filmmaker, and disability justice advocate, using film and other media as a tool for expression and social justice. Welcome, Reveca. Natasha Ofili is a storyteller who has interwoven feelings and experiences to inspire action, change, and emotions. She's an actress and creative director, and so much more. Welcome, Natasha. And finally, our moderator for this panel, Andraéa LaVant, is a storied strategist, an expert leading and supporting disability justice-focused communications and program development. She's an incredible cultural worker, and we're so thrilled to have her in person with us at the festival, but also shepherding this conversation. So welcome, everyone, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us here today. Hello, everyone. I am Andraéa LaVant, and I am thrilled to be in conversation with people that I consider not only to be amazing colleagues, but also friends. So this is a comfortable space. Before I continue, I'm going to provide a visual description of myself for access purposes. So today I am, well, every day I am a Black woman, we'll say that. But today I have long blonde and kind of a sherbet-y color braids. I am wearing some orange and tan fun cat eye glasses. I have on a purple lipstick, a gold necklace, and a beige colored shawl. And you can see a little bit of my dress that has butterflies on it. And behind me, it's a pretty bare white wall. So just for context, what I am excited about today in terms of our conversation and what I really want to kind of lay the groundwork around is we're having a conversation around disability justice. And I think that, you know, in this day and age, we use words kind of interchangeably. Sometimes you might hear disability rights, sometimes you might hear accessibility, sometimes you might hear disability justice. The importance and significance of the use of the word disability justice, and with who I'm in this space today, it's that disability justice is really around centering the perspectives of disabled folks of color, queer folks, others of us that have generally and quite often been marginalized even within the disability community. So today, that's what's so great, obviously about Black Star, that we're centering the perspectives of people of color, but in particular that we are having conversation with some incredible change makers in the film industry that have these intersectional identities. So we're gonna move from there. So let's begin by having folks introduce yourselves. More specifically, we got a brief version, but I'd love for each of you to tell us a bit about yourself and why you believe today's conversation focusing on the intersections of disability justice and filmmaking is so critical. Particularly would love you to talk about your lived experience and professional experiences in relation to that. And so how about we start with Reveca, if you don't mind.
Thank you. My name is Reveca Torres. I am a Mexican-American woman with a little bit longer than shoulder length brown hair. Today, I'm wearing a gray t-shirt and I'm sitting in my office with some black cabinets behind me and a blue wall. I'm really happy to be here and be in conversation with you all today. And I guess I'm an artist. I'm a filmmaker as well, first time filmmaker. And my experience has also involved being a co-director for the Real Abilities Film Festival in Chicago, and nonprofit work through an organization called Backbones. I'm the founder of that organization as well for people with spinal cord injuries. And I'm a person with a spinal cord injury since the age of 13. So I think it's 27 years now that I have lived with a disability. And I think that that has really informed both my art and now my filmmaking. And I think your question was why I'm excited about having this conversation. Was that correct?
Yes, particularly the intersections. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have these conversations, and I get really excited about these spaces where I personally feel like all of my identities are seen, and I could just sort of talk about my work in a way that I can talk about all the parts of myself. So I'm excited to hear more about the rest of the panelists as well.
Thank you so much, Reveca. Jay, tell us a little bit more about you and why you might be excited about today's conversation, including kind of your lived and professional experiences in film.
Sure. Thank you, Andraéa. My name is Andres J. Molina. I am a Latinx man born and raised in the Dominican Republic. I am actually I am bald-headed. I am wearing a black New York Jets t-shirt, and I am in my office with beige cabinets and a mural in the back. I am part of an organization called Open Doors, which is an organization that helps develop the creativity of disabled people. Within this organization, we have a subgroup called the Reality Poets, in which all of us write poetry, basically about things that happen in our lives, about real facts that happen in our lives. And we go to schools and we talk to kids about gun violence and the consequences of living a life in the streets. Um, I think this type of topic is very important because through history, disabled people have been always fighting for being treated equally like other people. And I think it's really important that we start working on that now, because more of us are being part of this great community now, and we just have to be represented well.
Amen to that. This is Andraéa again. Natasha, my girl, tell us about yourself and why today's conversation is so significant.
Hello, everyone. My name is Natasha Ofili. This is my sign name. I'm a Black woman, dark skinned, and I'm wearing a green vest dress with white and black striped sleeves. I'm in my office. Um, I'm sorry, I'm not finished my description. I have a curly afro. Um, I want to emphasize that the afro with the gold hoop earrings. I'm in my office, but I have different things set on the counters behind me. I'm really excited to be here today, here at Black Star. Thank you for giving me this platform to have this discussion, which is really important to discuss these different issues. A little bit about my background personally. I grew up in a mainstream deaf and hard of hearing program here in California, and I was exposed to a deaf teacher in the classroom with hearing students. So it was not an ASL teacher, it was actually a deaf teacher who taught both the hearing and the deaf students. So that was really touching. That was my personal experience as a deaf person, learning self advocacy and how to advocate in real life, in the real world, and how my career has, how that also parallels. You've discovered different challenges that makes it harder to navigate, and how the design to really work towards your goal. In Hollywood here creates an additional layer of how to navigate that space. And with this discussion today, wow, I think it's really important. Um, Going to elementary school with mostly Black deaf children, um, that um, gap or loss of exposure for some happens oftentimes with Black girls. And they often get really excited when they see me, and they're really googly eyed because they don't see themselves at all in most spaces. So it really is a wake up for action for me. And me as a filmmaker makes me work harder to make sure that they are represented on screen. And when I'm making these stories on screen, um, the characters, whether it's a teacher or a lawyer or a police officer or a variety of different things, I want them to see that and hope and know that it's possible. You can have these type of employments, these types of jobs with your disability, and you can see other successful adults navigating these spaces. So this discussion is really exciting, and I feel like the audience will really learn something as we continue this dialogue.
Wow, I love that. And that was a new story for me to hear, Natasha, about your teacher. Thank you for sharing. And so true. The power of storytelling and seeing ourselves is, I mean, it's critical. It's how we really, see and view ourselves as worthy, as valuable. So I'm excited to chat more about that. Let's take it back because what is clear from each of you all is that you're filmmakers, and so I would love to hear when it comes to the filmmaking process, specifically as disabled filmmakers. Can you share about your creative processes? So, in particular, what makes your experiences unique? We're in a room or in a virtual space with likely others that can relate to the filmmaking, but in comparison, perhaps to non-disabled filmmakers, kind of describe that process and how your approaches bring creativity to your work. And Maybe let's start backwards with Natasha.
Okay, wow. Great question. My number one thing that comes up in my mind is to break the rules. You have to break the rules. When you are creating a story, my story, there's no rules, there's no limitations because living with a disability, you feel that there's always restrictions, oppression, um, and it just makes you want to give up. So I started telling my story, and maybe it's unique with my creative process. Maybe that's different. No one can share my story. Everyone, whether Jay or Reveca or Andraéa, we all have our own personal story, a different, unique story. So I like to see and want more of that. That motivates me. That's my creative process. So that's what I do. In working previously as a fashion designer, that was where I was an intern, where I had to really look ahead and foreshadow designs for the following years. I had to force myself to create and challenge myself to create and throw something out. And with my creative process, whether it's writing or getting ready for poetry development or production development, I look for inspiration, and I have a memory board and a visual board that I use for my film. An example, the multi-film that I'm working on, it was 6 pages that I use for inspiration of stories. So I have the storyboard, and I also have videos of color, things that I'm looking for, whether it's warm, cool, tan colors. I take from different type of films that I've seen in the past that have given me inspiration. And I also show different equipments for example, red lipstick visuals. What would that look like on screen? How can I make that pop? And I use different things like that as my Bible when when recruiting the process of making my projects, whether it's the script, and really being able to include everyone in the story. And so far, I've really been amazed to use that type of creative process while I'm writing and using my whole wall. I have things everywhere, colors and latex, excuse me, not latex. I have different cards and different notes that I have all over the place. And it's really unique. So I want to see more of that.
I love that. Break the rules. Hashtag break the rules. That's amazing. Reveca, how about you?
I'm gonna piggyback off of breaking the rules because, yeah, I think for a long time I felt like trying to fit into these spaces for artists, and I kept my disability part of it, out of my art stuff, thinking that I had to keep them separate. But when I started mixing the two, that is when I think I started realizing, well, like I don't exactly fit in these other spaces, so I have to make my own path. And that is what's been really exciting for me is just like throw it out the window, all these like rules, throw it out the window and just like you do you. And yeah, my I guess my um art making has always involved someone to help me, a lot of collaboration. I also come from a background of fashion, and then I went into theater arts. And so, like, working a lot in like costuming and working with directors and just like all the people that come into theater, I think that kind of stuck in my head of like, there's all these people around you that like you don't have to do it all, you don't have to know everything, but you pull from the people that are like doing well in other spaces that can help you create. And I have limitations in my hands. I use a wheelchair, a power chair, so I don't really ever create anything on my own, whether it's a caregiver or a friend or an assistant. And that makes my process, I think, very unique, in that it comes with a lot of frustration. because sometimes I have a vision in my mind and I try to direct someone to do it and it doesn't come out the way I wanted it. Or it's like, oh, that didn't work at all, like how I thought it would. And so sometimes I scrap it, but sometimes I will be like, oh, well, this didn't work how I wanted it, but this is a fun surprise. Let's go with it. And sometimes really unique things come out of that, and in that process of just like working with someone. Um, and I've actually come to really like that. Like when there's a mistake or where there's something that I didn't expect that really turns into something really cool. In terms of the filmmaking, I think I never thought I could do filmmaking because of the camera, holding a camera or anything like that. And I had a friend one day who works with cameras. She let me borrow a camera and even brought some mounts so that I could put on my chair and we would like hook it up back here. And I had a camera out this way. I figured out how to mount it in just all sorts of ways on my chair. And that has really brought some like unique things to my filmmaking too. And I think Jay could probably talk about some of that too, because I know in their film it was all about like getting cameras on your chairs and getting the shots. So I'll leave it at that. That's a little bit about my process.
Thank you so much. I say all the time to the folks that we work with, disabled people are the most creative, innovative people you could ever have as part of the work that you're doing or what we're bringing to the table. Because every day we are working within environments that weren't built for us, or with products or tools that weren't built for us. And so then the ways that we creatively use them, it just ends up being beautiful and unique, like you said. So thank you so much. Jay, how about you? Share a little bit more about your kind of creative process as a disabled filmmaker.
Sure. Well, for me, it has been a journey. I wasn't born disabled. I just became disabled about 5 years ago. So basically, I had to learn how to live as a disabled man first before I made any type of move. I live in a nursing home in which basically me and my friends, the reality boys, are the youngest patients that live in this nursing home, and we used to hang out outside all the time, always wondering what we're gonna do with our lives. And then we started writing poetry together, and we realized that we wanted to do so much more than just writing poetry. So each one of us basically picked something to learn that could help us have a life in the outside when we move out of the nursing home. Me in particular, I picked filmmaking, and I basically taught myself everything I know about filmmaking by watching YouTube tutorials. And then the pandemic came, and we went through so much hardship and so much isolation in our nursing home that I decided that I wanted to let the world outside know what really happened in here. So we basically bought a whole bunch of GoPros, and we strapped the GoPros to our chairs, and we started filming everything in the nursing home. And being the fact that I am able to use my hands as a able-bodied person, I was in charge of strapping out the GoPros in the chairs of the guys that can really use the hands, and monitoring the filming and what they were filming. And then we collected all that footage together, and we decided to make this film just to let the outside world know about the pandemic and how it affected us in this nursing home.
I love it. And what you're speaking to, Jay, in addition to adding to the other parts of the conversations, is what we call, as part of the disability justice framework, interdependence. And that's when, we each have something to bring to the overall experience, to the table. So based on your abilities, you were able to strap the GoPros on, and you all were able to support each other, which is amazing. And that speaks to the production side of things. So having a disabled crew, if you will, in certain ways, you're filmmakers, and so that kind of leads me into more of a question around the production side. Thinking, Jay, you shared a little bit, but Natasha, I know that based on your film, The Multi, that most of your production team identified as disabled as well. So for anyone, this is kind of open. I'd love to hear your perspective in relation to working with crews and production teams, specifically in engaging disabled folks as a part of that process.
Yes. When I started making when I started making when I set up my production company, Neovision, Neovision, the goal was to bring this disability perspective, the disability story inside of it. And also the deaf and hard of hearing crew is the number one goal of mine. And also with the multi, that film, we had a total of 8 deaf and hard of hearing and 2 hearing persons on set. And I think that was the biggest win because we had a lot of disabled or deaf and hard of hearing people that are in the film industry that don't get the opportunities, period. And that's a big issue. So that I wanted to offer to directors and producers and DPs and everyone involved in the filmmaking process that we need those jobs too, paying jobs. And even though it's a small production company that I have, I made sure I paid all of the crew. And we made beautiful stories using their gifts, their passion. So I wanted to make sure that we all share the same common goal. And with the 2 hearing people on set, they never worked with deaf people ever. So this was a new collaboration with them and patience and learning each other and being present in this space and those aha moments and how to figure it out and those language barriers. But we tried to have interpreters and access for everyone. But when we wrapped up, the DP, who was a hearing person, he worked as an intern for 10 years or so. And he said this is one of the best sets that he's ever worked on. You know, I'm like, yay, that's a win. I mean, hey, we can do it. We can do it. Which means I just wanted to encourage everyone right now to be open-minded, open-hearted with people that you see on and behind the screens. We have a lot to offer. And just as briefly, my film is in the film festival now. It's one of the films there. And I got an email with the congratulations. And someone asked me, hi, are you deaf? Are you deaf? And I said, yes, I am. And I think what happened is most of the content with disability stories, especially the deaf and hard of hearing, are made by hearing people. They go to film festivals and they speak for us. And having a deaf person on their set or whatever, they always speak for us. And as a deaf filmmaker, going and accepting hearing and being accepted into a hearing film festival, they weren't used to this. It's like a white person writing a Black story or speaking for us. In some ways, it's meant to silence us, but this is just exposure, really. You know, I'm the one on the platform talking about these types of things and what happens and what works because I made the decision to do so. So that is what I really wanted to continue. In any type of story that I write or film that I shoot, I hire deaf and hard of hearing and those with living with disabilities as my crew, period.
Thank you so much. There's a phrase often used in the disability community, nothing about us without us. And it's so interesting to me that in 2022, we are allowing these things to happen, where indeed there are non-disabled people playing disabled parts, when in any other community or with any other cultural identity, that would not, people would not have it. They just would not have it. And yet still, when it comes to disabled, and we're out here we are, saying that we're available and ready. So thank you. Anyone else want to share, just kind of on the side of production and crews, working with disabled crews or production teams?
Yes, I would like to add something to that. Actually, in my case, um, I have I have been lucky enough to have people next to me working with me that recognize the fact that not only that I'm disabled, but that I also have a lot of health issues going on with me. So they've been able to help me in the fact of letting me rest when I need to rest, and always scheduling meetings and events around me, basically around when I'm able to do it, because my energy is really limited and I'm not able to always be part of an event or a meeting. So we always schedule everything around me, basically. And that's been of great help, because it has let me work on my own time and also work on the things that I want to work with also. And I want to thank everybody for allowing me to do that.
Thank you. That is so true. That's a form of access. When we talk about accessibility, I think a lot of folks in mainstream culture think physical accessibility. Is there a ramp to get into the building? Or, perhaps is there ASL interpretation? Things like that. But what you are describing, Jay, is access. Again, I'm bringing in disability justice along the way, principles, but collective access. What does it mean for me as a disabled person, or for you as a disabled person, to be able to fully participate in a space or in a project or in an activity? And things like flexible schedules is a form of access, right? So, and with that, let's chat a little bit more about accessibility. Um, uh, Reveca, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what you consider to be accessibility, specifically in the film space. What do you kind of, I'm sure folks are wondering, what are baseline requirements? Like, what is a non-negotiable? When you think about working on a project, or even with the project or with people, what would make you say absolutely no, not, because it doesn't meet my kind of general standards? And then after that, what do you kind of consider to be perhaps a gold standard? What would make you even more happy to see or experience when it comes to accessibility?
Yeah, I think, oftentimes we can kind of get into our silos. Like, as a wheelchair user, like, when my initial thing is, like, when I think of access, I think physical access, right? And how to get in a space, how to navigate a space. But um, over the years, as I have met many other people with different disabilities than my own, I realized that access is so much more than having a ramp, than being able to go into a door. Like, access means having an ASL interpreter. Access means having captioning at an event, having a film being audio described, which is like a track that plays what is happening in the imagery of the film. um, Having image descriptions when we have panels like this. Um, I think today we're demonstrating some of that with some of the access features that are happening on this panel. And there are times where I've been places where they've asked me to maybe speak about the film or about art or whatever it may be, and there's a stage and there's no ramp to get on the stage, and everyone else is invited to come on the stage, but I'm expected to be on the main level, and that's not okay. Like I deserve to be right on that stage with everybody else, right? And so that's, I think that's one definitely, if you're not going to have a ramp for me and you're inviting me to come up here, like I think that's about like dignity, giving us that like dignity of like we deserve to be there and we are invited into the space and deserve to be there. And so similarly, like being able to enter through the front door. Oftentimes, we have to go through alleys and kitchens and places. And again, to me, it goes back to, if everyone else is going through the front door, I want to go through the front door too. And I know that may seem like something little, but it's really, really big. Yeah, and I think for me, it's been really, really eye-opening for me to learn about different access things that my friends with disabilities different than my own are, require or need to participate. And this question that you said earlier of like, what do you need to participate? It's something that I went into a Zoom meeting early in the pandemic, and somebody asked that it was a lot of people with disabilities on this call, and they asked that, what do you need to participate today? And such a simple question, but really an important one for us to ask in any space that we enter.
Right, and that levels the playing field, because that question isn't about a diagnosis or a disability, right? It's when we all have different days where we're experiencing different things. And so what it may take for me to participate in a space today may look different tomorrow. I could come into a Zoom meeting and have a headache and need to keep my camera off, right? That's just what my base need is today. And so I think it's about normalizing needs. And then when normalizing needs, then we can create more accessible spaces, because we're saying this is what I need. And so in order to be able to participate or to access whatever this is, this is what I need in order to do that. So thank you for that. I totally relate as a chair user to the front door as well. Natasha, anything that you would add from an access perspective?
Yes, I want to add some great things. You all said some great things. I totally get it. That really resonated. One of the things that comes up for me, meaning access for everyone, which means universal access, like Andraéa said, having things normalized, to think about that. And also, Andraéa mentioned earlier that people with disabilities are the most creative. We're forced to think outside of the box. And also, we want to think outside of the box too. So it's the force and the want, that we're always thinking in creative ways to improve and better solutions for our community. And what tends to happen is that we're always accommodating them, making things easier for them. And now adding access, that's accessible for everyone. So we're meeting each other halfway. So that's a dialogue that we need to have everywhere. It should be automatically included with audio descriptions. They don't think about the ASL interpreters, how to provide a system that makes things easier to navigate for everyone. Me, as a filmmaker and a small production company owner, I have to think about access for everyone. When I'm signing, whether I'm doing a film and acting and signing in a film, what is the technology for that? I'm going to have captioning during that process. But now we have so many resources for those that use spoken language that can be translated into caption. So there's many resources that we use in other organizations. One of four, they provide a lot of resources. So they have a lot of information of how we can continue to start that now and add accessibility. and have that available for everyone where it becomes the normal and it becomes easier and not expensive. And making a film is expensive now. That's expensive. But the human right is priceless. It's priceless.
That's a mic drop. The human right is priceless. I love this. I love this. And, when I'm thinking, as I'm hearing you all talk about, some of the, pieces around accessibility, some of them pretty baseline. You've got, your interpreters, you've got your audio descriptions that are coming up more and more that we're seeing. We're excited that we're at this year's festival. And, I know one of the pieces that I wanted to bring up, recognizing that we're at Black Star, which is a very specific and unique space because we're centering Black and people of color films and filmmakers. When you think about that, specifically your intersectional lived experiences as a disabled person of color, how does that, or does that, this is kind of open for any of you, influence your work and even your interactions? One thing that I think about as I ask that question is how, it's one thing to see an ASL interpreter in a space, but when you come into a Black space and you see a person of color as an ASL interpreter, like, what does that mean? Or I'll never forget an audio describer talking about, hearing a film. It was actually Black Panther, and the audio describer was clearly British, and they said Wakanda. And so I can imagine listening to this film and it being somewhat unrelatable because you have someone that doesn't identify within this community, and it skews the overall experience. So that's kind of an access piece, but I'm wondering whether you all, based on that intersectional experience, does that influence or impact your work even more? If you can share about that.
I think there is a safety that comes with it. Like, I feel safe in a space where I can, like I said earlier, where like all my identities are welcome, and I don't have to, I guess, like, so my first language is Spanish. And so I grew up, speaking Spanish, and went to a school where I was the only brown kid there and stuff like that. And so always kind of in the back of my mind, making sure that like I had to sort of think like, okay, you can't say that Spanish word, or when that was like my initial word that I wanted to use. And I think same with like disability space. Sometimes like I may not use a word that that able-bodied people might not understand what I mean by it. And so like being in spaces like you being able to use I think I've kind of evolved in personally where like I don't really care anymore of like restricting or policing my own language or ways that I interact with other people. Like if that Spanish word comes into my brain first, I will use it. And if someone has a question about it, I will explain it. But like it's sort of been liberating, I guess, is where I'm getting at. That was a long way of getting there, but that's how I feel about that.
I love it.
Yeah, well, let me piggyback from what Reveca said. I'm also a Spanish man, and basically, I still think in Spanish. Like whenever I'm having a conversation, I'm thinking the answers come to my head in Spanish first, and then I have to translate into English. And I was having a lot of trouble with that at the beginning of me living in the United States because a lot of people wouldn't understand me when I would stop to think. And I was actually translating in my head the words that I was going to say. So I struggled with that at first. But then as the time went on, I started thinking English, which was actually amazing to me how I learned to speak in Spanish, and everything through my life was always in Spanish, and now all of a sudden I am even thinking English. And then the people around me was able to recognize that and accept me as such.
I love it. Thank you so much. Natasha, I want to hear your perspective on this.
Yes, I'm a Black Deaf woman, Black Deaf girl. And one thing about identity, I thank my mom for that. She really valued who I was 100%. Always. She always has been. I've always been solid about my identity. Black, dark skinned woman. First generation here in America. I've always loved and valued my African heritage. So that exposure to the different foods. I remember my mom told me at 11 years old, she sat down with me and she said, Natasha, I'm going to let you know that society in the world is tough. It's a tough place. You're Black, you're a woman, and you're deaf. And at that time, I didn't understand what that meant. But she said, remember, anyone try to take you down, never allow that to happen. You are you. I said, oh, okay. I still didn't get it at the time. But as I became an adult, oh, shit. Okay. This is a tough world. They criticize me. There's oppression. There's frustration. There's obstacles, barriers. And you can really lose your footing. So that talk that my mom had with me at 11 years old um, really keeps me going. Okay, girl, I own this now. Let me keep it pushing. Let me keep it rolling. But that really does impact. That really had an impact on me as an individual. Because here, Hollywood, the Hollywood standards in realizing your appearance is really important. Like dark-skinned people are not also looked as desirable. I'm also doubting myself. Am I not pretty enough? Am I not fitting that standard? Do I not look a certain way? So I have to realize, and my husband was telling me, no, no, no. Remember what your mother told you? Okay, okay, babe. Okay, okay. Let me get it together. Let me snap out of it. So I try not to think like that. You have to be your own light. So that is what keeps me going. I think about those Black deaf girls. I think about those girls in school that don't have a role model, representation. So I try to do whatever I can in any way.
Ah, I love it. I don't snap well, but if I could, I would, right? Thank you. Yes, Black Mama. I love it. So we kind of, and I want to leave a little bit of time for questions if there are any. And then I'm not sure if we want to maybe show some of the, if we don't, we can show a piece of the multi. We can also do that. But I want to, so thinking about accessibility, thinking about the perspectives that we've talked about throughout our conversation and the crew, I think, do you all, what advice do you give when it comes to kind of the practices around access? When, that's a big question. So we've talked about what people need to do. But is there a win on any of this when it comes to folks aiming to work with or alongside and engaging disabled people in their projects and their films?
I think right at the beginning is, sorry, did you want to?
No, Go for it.
Yeah, I think right at the beginning is really important to think about that, because if you're thinking about your audience, whatever audience it may be, there's going to be disabled people in that audience. Whatever, whoever your target audience is, there 100% will be disabled people, and it's something you need to think about right at the very beginning when you start any project, including whether there are disabled people that are on your creative team or not, and thinking about, yes, your creative team, your crew, your audience, your impact campaigns, and adding all of these things into your budget if you are making a film. Because when you get to the end and you don't have any money and then you want to do all this, then you're going to be scrambling. So adding that into budgets so that also funders can start seeing that these are things that need to be funded and that they need to give money to, and just having that be visible from the very beginning.
Absolutely. At the beginning, and engaging us at the beginning, meaning nothing about us without us. So we're not saying, I'm just gonna add it in as part of what Reveca is saying. What we're not saying is do it on your own. We're saying reach out to us, reach out to those with the lived experience that can support you in doing this. That's really important as well. So thank you. I'm totally with you on that. So as we get to questions, there might be one question that seems like, feel free to pass that over. Okay, I see it. But before we get to that, I have one burning piece, and I think that's, all of us in this conversation here, we know that we have so far to go when it comes to disability justice as relates to filmmaking. But to your point, Reveca, when we talk about disability, often there is the 1 in 4 folks, 1 in 4 Americans have disabilities. What people often don't drill down to, and what we're talking about today, is also the fact that 1 in 4 Black people have disabilities. There's stats that 1 in 6 Latinx folks have disabilities, 1 in 10 Asian folks have disabilities, so on and so forth. So indeed, we are here. That means 25% of the population. So with that, when it comes to both in front of and behind the camera, what do you feel like, is there anything that we're just not seeing at all yet that we need to see? And then what do we need to see or experience more of? And I'd love for all of you all to answer that question.
Yeah, well, in my case, working with disabled people as my crewmates has made it so much special. Like it's basically like magic, because not only do we have to worry about the project, also we have to worry about our personal agenda and how we are feeling on that day, and we are basically just worrying about everybody and worrying about how their skills are going to be represented and how they are going to be bring up justice in the film or the project. And that made our project so much special. And I think that donors and people that fund these projects have to take that in account. That it's not just about making a film or doing a project. It's about the life experiences and how everybody is working together in these projects.
So even broader perspectives. We need more folks, donors in particular, those that are funding and supporting the projects at the beginning and even moving forward, to consider all of our needs. That's great. Thank you, Jay. Natasha, what are your thoughts on this? What do you see? What do you see? What do we need to see?
For for the front of the camera, we need to see Black, deaf, hard of hearing, and Black people with disabilities on camera. You may have deaf artists or actresses or actors, but where's the BIPOC performers? There's a lot of us in the Black community, in the disability space, that are also put to the bottom of the totem pole. And the disability community is already marginalized and has been for over 400 years. But now, when you talk about Black disabled people, we are actually at the bottom of the food chain. So we need to see more of us. We need to have that safe space to have that conversation within our own community about Black disabilities, and more representation as it relates to that, and more heartfelt conversations at home, in the dinner table, at school. All of these spaces are education opportunities. Now, behind the camera, we need to have the production companies that make these films, people that stories, they make stories about wheelchair users or blind people that are visually have visual disabilities, include them in the process of making those stories in those projects. We need those people, their lived experiences. I can't count how many people and how many films I see today all over the world that have a deaf person or a blind person, um, but they don't have any representation behind the screen of those actors or those experiences. So where's the balance? So then you are really walking in a story. You need to do the research. You need to have the people, because there can be a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions. So that's why it's important to have people with disabilities behind the camera. And I would love to see more people with disabilities writing. We need to have more. But my question is, where is us? Jay is here. I see Reveca here. I see Andraéa. I have myself, but there's so many more of us. So that's it. That's all I want to say about that.
We need more of us. We need more of us. Thank you so much. And Reveca, I see that the captioner had to sign off. So I don't want to go too much longer from an access perspective, because we don't want to exclude anyone. That's not what we're here to do. But Reveca, if there's anything here that you would like to add, and then we're gonna, I know there were questions, but we're not gonna not practice what we preach. So yes, if there's anything to add here.
Yeah, I'll just add something briefly. And what Natasha said, that we need more of us. And I think that a lot of times people think that disability is a negative thing or something to have shame around, but there is so much pride in our community, and like, we are proud of who we are. We are proud of our experience. We're proud of the work that we're making, and people don't realize that there is a disability culture that includes, art and language and visuals and sound, movement. We have culture, and bringing all of these things, looking at all of these things as not as access needs, but as creative tools that we are bringing into our spaces, into the things that we are making. That's a really important thing that we sort of need to shift the world into thinking that this is our culture and it should be visible and celebrated. And I'd love to see us have more spaces, whether it is, making films, having opportunities for fellowships to learn, auditions, pitches. We need to feel welcome in all of these spaces, and not just have the opportunity, but feel welcome to be in them and to thrive.
Absolutely. That's a great, that's it. We bring so much. And we are a community, we're a culture. There's pride here, just as much as I'm proud of being a Black woman. I'm incredibly proud of to be a Black disabled woman. And I think that's what we're here to say. And we want to be a part of the mainstream, and bring our perspectives, as human beings, to the table, and to the world, to the storytelling space. So thank you all so much today. How can we follow what you're doing, follow your work, see your films? Where can we find you? Jay.
Yes. Well, if you log into our website, which is firethroughdragrass.com, you can see a synopsis of my documentary and all the members of the team, and also Open Doors NYC, which is the organization that I'm part of. You can see all our work and my poetry and my visual work also.
Thank you so much. Natasha.
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Natasha_OFILI. Also, I have a website. It's called NatashaOfili.com. And my production company, NeoVision.com.
Thank you. And Reveca.
My website is RevecaTorres.com, and on Instagram, Revecart.
Yay. Thank you all so much. This was incredible to share space. Thank you to our fantastic interpreter today. Thank you, Jafran. And to each of you, it's always great to share space. Let's continue the work. Y'all take care.
Thank you.